For our final session of the exchange, please join me in welcoming our speakers for the Operational AI DICE Network panel, featuring Nathaniel Bastian from the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, Tom Horan from the Defense Innovation Unit, Major Victor Lopez of AFWERX, Lieutenant Colonel Jack Long, Acting Navy Chief AI Officer in the Office of Naval Research, and Lindsey Sheppard, Director of the Advanced Command and Control Accelerator at CDAO, with Moderator Sarah Pearson, Deputy Director for the Defense Innovation Unit.
All right, good afternoon. We understand that we are the last panel of the day, and initially we were supposed to talk for an hour and 10 minutes. I don't know how many people want to hear about AI for an hour and 10 minutes right here. So, okay, probably shouldn't have thrown that out as an option. We're going to keep it light and fun, and we'll see how long that this runs. But first of all, thank you all for coming to the last panel of the day on operationalizing AI. My name is Sarah Pearson. I'll be your moderator this afternoon. I hail from the great DIU, Defense Innovation Unit, where I lead all of our commercial engagement. We'll go through the panelists here in a second. I first wanted to thank SCSP for continuing their partnership with DIU and with all of our organizations for the second event here. So thank you all for having us. I'm lucky to be joined by many smart people, brilliant people. I'm going to go down the line here. First, I'm joined by Lindsey Sheppard at CDAO. Lindsey is the Director for Advanced C2 Accelerators. Next, I've got Jack Long, Lieutenant Colonel Jack Long, hailing from the Navy Chief AI Officer, or Deputy to the Navy Chief AI Officer.
Office
Thank you so
Naval
much.
Yep.
There we go. Major Vic Salsa Lopez, always need to keep the call sign in there, coming from AFWERX, where he is the Chief of Autonomy Operations. Next, I've got Tom Horan, a dear friend of mine, the Director of the AI portfolio here at DIU. And last but not least, I've got Nate Bastian, who is a PM at DARPA, and also a professor at West Point, which is what I think is one of the most interesting pieces on this panel. So thank you all for making the time, stepping out of the skiff and the workspaces to be here with us today. So honestly, I was going to kick this panel off by starting to talk about the inflection point that we are at right now with regards to AI. However, I'm going to pull an audible. I'm going to share a quote. It's a touch long, but go with me on this journey here. So this is a quote from the SecDef's annual report to Congress. And it goes like this. Last year, DARPA began an important program in strategic computing, which will expand significantly this year. Seizing the opportunity to leverage recent advances in AI, computer science, microelectronics, DARPA plans to create a new generation of machine intelligence technology for applications across autonomous vehicles, battle management systems, the list goes on. At first, when I saw this quote via Jack Long, I thought it was Secretary Hegseth that he might have been referring to. It was not. As a matter of fact, it was the Secretary of Defense Caspar Weinberger in 1985. 40 years ago, this is what the SecDef told Congress. And it's the same thing we were going to sit up here and talk about for an hour and 10 minutes. 40 years later, at a very different point in American history and in kind of technology and the landscape that we're at. So, to the point on inflection and where we're at right now, everybody here on this stage, in particular the last 6 months, comes to work every day and is trying to understand and soak up all of the information that is flowing across our ecosystems within defense, inside the building, inside the Pentagon, the ecosystems that is companies building and selling commercial tech for all of us to prototype and to implement across and scale across the DoD, the ecosystem of investors that are fueling the companies that are building awesome things, all of those things. But just to give you a snapshot of the inputs to the model, which is the brains on this stage. Day 2 of the Trump administration, the White House obviously announced the Stargate project to ensure that we maintain dominance over AI, over this critical technology for the rest of the world. So there's that. We've got frontier labs iterating at a pace that you've never seen for any technology in the history of mankind, and that's hard to keep up on. We've got the US government eager. Every single person, no matter their role, wants to utilize AI for everything from back office productivity to wargaming to kinetic actions and implications. You've got $43 billion poured into this space last year across approximately 40 deals. And by the way, you've got a tax bill that cleared the House last week that said AI does not need to be regulated at the state level for a decade, I believe. We kind of gave that. So, my panelists, we've got a lot going on. To kick off the panel, I was hoping you each, in no particular order, could share a little bit about your perspective from each of your organizations, and how are you waking up every day and facing this challenge in addition to the challenges we see from our adversaries?
I'll go first.
Jack's eager.
It was the quote I found, and one of the things when I think about technology, at least the way I approach it, is that AI is actually not new. It's quite old. We've been using it for decades. It's been around for a very long time, and just like we're similar to aviation, we've had flight for over 120 years, and flight keeps getting better as we have advances. It allows us to use aviation differently. AI is the same way, except we recognize that with flight, but we don't recognize it with aviation. So we all tend to think AI is this new stuff, and there's this new generation of people each year that's like, oh, AI is new. It's not, and we've actually been using it for decades, and the best way to think about how to employ AI is to recognize that it's increasingly powerful and it's able to solve increasingly complex tasks. So taking those lessons learned from the previous decades of how we've been employing AI is going to inform a lot about what's going to be capable as the AI gets more capable. That's how I think about AI.
What else? How are you waking up with AI these days? Lindsey?
Well, so I have a somewhat fortuitous position in that, the group that I'm running at CDAO is the Advanced Command and Control Accelerator, which gives me a very nice, relatively narrow stovepipe with which to view the world. If it's a command and control problem, if it's about how we modernize the operational decision making and the business of warfighting for the department, it's within scope. If it's not, I'm sure it's a hard problem, and many of the great panelists here can help us tackle those. So that is a really nice kind of functional lens for us to think through how do we get the most advanced capability in the hands of our warfighters. We think about that from a kind of stratification of we're looking at mission command applications at the strategic to operational level. How do you connect those data flows and those insights down to the tactical edge from your operational to tactical level? And then how do you provide the venues and opportunities for the department to experiment, to try out technologies, to get reps and sets to exercise with those new technologies on live networks, with live data, with real users that are going to use it every day once you leave behind that exercise. And so in that way, we really prioritize not just artificial intelligence, but how do we think through the broader digital modernization of our command and control functions, and really just accelerating that flywheel of innovation within the department.
Accelerating the flywheel.
Yes, so Lindsey and I are quite complementary too. We actually work together on a multitude of projects, a lot of funding, resourcing going back and forth too between our two organizations. And completely agree with what she's saying. Like there's the proliferation of components that we need to do now is what we're focused on. At DIU, obviously, we look at more on the commercial side versus some of the other organizations on the stage, but we're all cultivating to the same goal here. And a lot of that is how do we actually get the resources we need when we all know that every single day when we log on the Nipper, we're actually going back in time 30 years from what we have available on the commercial side of the market, which is an incredibly frustrating thing. And at the same time, we're also dealing with some vendors who are close friends coming up to us saying, you all are not moving fast enough. Why are you not moving fast enough? And we're getting demand signal from both the executive and legislative branches above us too, saying, you all are not moving fast enough. I'm like, yeah, we hear you loud and clear. And we are legitimately kicking down barriers. And I'll say in the past few months, those barriers are falling down from both a technical perspective and from a policy and implementation perspective as well to enable that to happen. And so it's been a really exciting time. But like you said, Sarah, like the pace right now of ingest is quite high. I mean, every night I'm spend more than a fair amount of time on Hacker News trying to catch up on everything that's being released. And even for someone that like lives in this space every day, you take a day off and the world has left you behind on that.
Absolutely. Hey y'all, Major Vic Lopez, Salsa from AFWERX. AFWERX's mission is really to help connect the defense and industrial base and small startups to airmen and guardians within the department. Through those lenses, we have a couple different branches I want to highlight. In addition to the SIBR portfolio that we manage, we have our Spark division, who really ensures warfighter connection and integration at the tactical level. And the Prime division, helping to kind of engineer what that future looks like. And within Autonomy Prime, at least for the last probably 18, 20 months, we have been hyper-focused on delivering computer vision, robotics, data pipeline, and AI/ML capabilities, both prototyping them for warfighters and then actually delivering them everywhere from CENTCOM to EUCOM, here in NORTHCOM, as well as over in Indo-PACOM. And across those combatant commands, we see similar problems that keep us up every night. Access to compute, access to servers, access to networks. And in addition, as a layer of policy through all of that, is our ability to accredit these systems at a speed that our warfighters actually care about. Whenever we get through those barriers, you'll be surprised what some of these airmen who are here today flying drones, they got 3rd place today in the drone competition, so go Air Force. Heck of a job for them. Those airmen over there, a few of them in particular who are flying those drones, are the same ones that when I connected them to the AFRL high-performance computing system, took it in strides. And one lieutenant and myself created what is now this beautiful thing called Nipper GPT, which is like the very first on-prem LLM that we ran in DoD. But that only happened because we gave them access to compute at a speed that they could do it, but they couldn't connect to it from Nipper. They went home and worked from it from there, doing it on their nights and weekends because that is what mattered to them. And when we do that, we start seeing really impressive things happening, even in CENTCOM, the TF-99 guys who are making these UASs fly around. You go upstairs and it is a room of gaming computers and RGB, not Nipper machines, that are enabling the mission at scale.
So from a DARPA perspective, you know, in thinking back since the DoD's really gotten in the space of AI, not back since 40 years ago, but really 2017, maybe even a little bit earlier with Project Maven, and then since then, I've noticed a lot of the focus has been, you know, what advantages can we gain? Seeing terms like decision advantage and things like that in our strategy documents. But everything's been very focused on, you know, what AI can do for warfighting, et cetera. But as we know, to actually have advantage, there's like a relative sense to that, right? There's a relativity to what our adversaries have versus what we have and how we employ. But there's actually been very little focus on the counter side. So a lot of our investments and a lot of our strategy to achieve you know, what we want to achieve has been not very focused on our ability to counter our adversaries' capabilities. And I would make the argument that at DARPA and some of the other labs and places across the joint community, that's an area of focus we need to really put our money against. That yes, there is an arms race for AI capability across the world. And so there's always going to be this cat and mouse with AI and its integration and our adoption of it. But our true ability to gain an advantage is going to come from our ability to counter that, to be able to use capability, to be able to, for periods of time and space, achieve relative windows of superiority. So at DARPA, we now have a new program focused on that. It's one of my programs called SABR. SABR, as we know, is kind of it's a dual-edged sword, right? So there's certainly an aspect of using counter AI to red team our own capabilities, but it also has a dual purpose of being able to, you know, deliver specific effects against our adversaries' capabilities. This is going to be an experimentation-driven set of exercises. We will be developing novel AI kill chains and techniques and technologies to really look at operationally assessing, to find and discover vulnerabilities across the pipeline. So if you think about this, most work in adversarial AI, which is really the intersection of computer security and AI, has been very much focused on the model, right? What I can do, the model's brittle, okay, yeah, sure. But as we all know, deploying an AI-enabled system is more than just a model. Many of you have probably seen that classic graphic where you have like the machine learning box is like the small box, and then you have all the other software components that actually make it into a piece of software or a capability. And so, but a lot of the research has only been on the little ML box. But when you think about it, when we're deploying a system and its pipeline that's continually being developed and maintained, there's a lot of unique threat vectors that are more than just the model. Could be the operational environment itself, could be the actual sensors and the data that those sensors produce, could be the feeds between those sensors and some sort of data pipeline that's used to curate and prepare data for building models, and I could go down the list. And so I'll just, Saber's really going to be focused on understanding the vulnerabilities across that space where it's not only adversarial AI, but it's also cyber exploitation, electromagnetic effects, even things in the physical world through what we print and manufacture, and how we can leverage different types of an intersection of threat vectors to actually find where our models and our pipelines are brittle, but also using that knowledge to actually build an open source adversarial kind of intelligence network, if you will, to then allow us to build future capabilities that give us that true advantage.
So kind of just diving in, I know before you ask the next question, on both what Nate and Salsa just said, yeah, the focus right now has been on the models, and I absolutely think that's the wrong focus.
Right.
Realistically, we're delivering these systems for the E1 through E5, O1 through O4-ish, not the flag officer GoFo level. I need to enable the actual, no-kidding warfighters to do this, and the best thing I can do is just lower the barrier of entry, provide them the capabilities, and let them go and execute, and show me what capabilities they really are absolutely, they can do. That's the emergent property of AI that we really need to be executing on, and that's how we deliver, and that's how we win.
I'm glad you just went there, because as Nate was talking about all the things it takes to actually develop and push these systems into production, that's a ton, what you just heard. I'm curious across the board how you guys are going from big need that you hear from our partners across the DoD, the war fighter, right? How are we going from that to reduce the barrier, let's get it to a one-pager, here's our problem, and let industry start to inform the ways, not just how we solve the problems, but also the what, right? Like how are you guys doing that across your organizations?
I think I can highlight AFWERX challenges, and I think DIU does something very similar, where we invite industry, and I'll give AFSOC as an example. So I mentioned a little bit about how we're developing robotic systems and these autonomous systems, including all the ML ops pipelines that are required to make a robotic autonomous system effective, right? Autonomous drones, if you will, for the Air Force. Well, that's a great tech, but AFSOC had to go and actually POM for that. And we started that process in 2019, 2018, with white papers, right, and one-pagers. And this past year, we had a consortia, a challenge, where we actually brought in industry for autonomy, for robotics, because the reality is I'm probably going to suck, as will all of my predecessors, on how to actually build out these multi-agent systems in a way that's going to work, given the commercial solutions currently available today, at the speed of academic relevance that is coming out of our academic institutions. So if I want to beat China, and I want to ensure that I'm at the highest level of my capability, I need to be leveraging what is coming out of the academic institution at the same time that I'm understanding what is production ready and available. So when we brought this consortium together and we created this challenge, what we did is we deconflicted and we built out small teams with all of these companies to bring to us what they thought were the most pressing problems, given our operational vignette. So we started the day with an operational vignette. This is what we'd like to do in the future. And we made a fictional scenario of a evac of Ukraine from Kiev given an invasion. Totally fictional. But given that, and we want to use autonomous systems, how might we use them? How might they communicate? What problems are we going to have? Now let's spend 3 days working through all of those problems to build out our true requirements list and the derived requirements that we're going to have to contract for to make a difference.
I can build on that a little bit. So from a broader DARPA perspective, in terms of lowering the barriers to entry, within the last 2 years, we've kicked off an initiative known as DARPA Connect, which is really meant to kind of be that bridge to bring in non-traditional DARPA performers, because being a DARPA performer is very different than kind of the rest of the acquisition community, where we're trying to build extremely disruptive things like the internet and stealth technology and things like that, and that's kind of intimidating to get into that ecosystem. And so DARPA Connect is a new initiative, relatively new initiative. We have pop-up events across the country where we're trying to bring in non-traditional performers, education, different educational institutions, small businesses, et cetera, to kind of lower that entry to, because we do have multiple efforts at DARPA, right? You have your classic big programs, we have studies and seedlings and SIBRs and FTTRs and commercial solution offerings and all kinds of opportunities that, you know, kind of lower the barrier for everybody. But on a consortium model, I'd say one of our biggest successes was the setup of our initiative called Project Constellation. Project Constellation is an effort, it's really a relationship and a technology transition pipeline set up between DARPA and US Cyber Command, where both parties jointly fund this initiative, where it takes the latest and greatest research advances that are coming out of DARPA, primarily related to cyberspace operations, and then through this pipeline brings in the operators and a variety of other stakeholders across US Cyber Command to actually transition that technology in a way that's extremely rapid, agile, et cetera, not just from a development perspective, an engineering perspective, but also in our ability to onboard new performers and things like that, startups that are really coming out of nowhere in some cases, that have an amazing capability that we can quickly onboard and contribute to that broader mission. And so that allows us to get the latest and greatest out of DARPA, but also is helping build out that ecosystem. And, you know, just like AI systems, we should be building them in a modular way. Well, we need to have the best performers that we can swap in and swap out at kind of any moment in time, being able to change the task, change the goals. Because no one here predicted, you know, 7 months ago that agentic AI would like shoot out, and now everyone's talking about that. But we didn't have that in the requirement, you know, 5 months ago, right? So we need the ability to adapt. I mean, as an AI researcher myself, we can't keep pace with the number of archive papers and open source proliferation of models. Like, it's just so much that it's hard to keep up with. So having this consortium model allows us to be agile and flexible to actually deliver capability into operations much quicker than we could ever before.
One of the bottlenecks I think all of our organizations potentially face is around contracting. Acquisition, as you're hearing right now, sometimes we'll start a program, months will pass, and the state of play, the companies competing in that space have evolved, and different folks are differentiated for different reasons. I'm curious if AI, it's something in DIU we've thought about how can we bring AI into that selection process, that procurement process, so that we can do more and be more agile and be more efficient. I'm curious if other orgs have thought about that, knowing how hard it is to actually go from starting something all the way through to putting a company on contract to develop something. And I'm not even talking about scale yet. I'm literally just talking about the beginning.
ACBot, right?
Yeah, ACBot that's tied with DIPRGPT. It's been, for those that have access, it's the next tile down. And the Army's actually kind of been leading the way on that too, trying to figure out, they were one of the early adopters of LLMs for helping to write contract language. Yep. And that helps quite a bit. I say when I moved into the acquisitions world from the operations world, I had no appreciation for the amount of effort it takes to write a contract. The amount of justifications that have to go in, all the diligencing and everything like that. And so anything we can do to help that and speed that process up, because right now it's legitimately people with hands on keyboard typing that in and doing that. And so I know there's a multitude of efforts, DIU, like Sarah said, we've both implemented and are looking at too, and that's not just on the actual writing of contract, but all the back-end stuff that you don't just see when you go on the federal contracts database website. So how do we do things like better diligencing of the companies, so we actually understand are these companies actually good to work with or not? How do we ensure that we're actually doing, FCLs are huge, so facility clearances and things like that for companies are a huge issue. How do we speed up that process as well? So that's some of the areas that absolutely DIU in particular is looking at, but all organizations are taking a gander at, but it needs to be at a much faster adoption rate.
And I would say, I think we're thinking about buying the wrong thing. We all talk about how we're not moving fast enough. One of the reasons we're not moving fast enough, we are moving fast, but the technology is moving faster. You know, we are built as an organization to kind of handle technology that improves at 1% to 2% per year. We can palm for that and do all that, and I think a technology that's growing at 30% per year tends to outpace us. And when I look at what does it look like to do rapid capability development, you know, of existing technology, to me, I kind of look back at the iPhone's, implementation of the App Store back in 2008. So when I think about how do we start to employ AI faster, models from academia, models from industry to get them out on platforms, I don't think we've enabled that iPhone platform-like model yet. And then that would quickly allow us to buy not quite the app, but the model or the solution through that vetted pipeline, right? And then a lot of those things that we're trying to struggle with, as opposed to 1,000 flowers blooming, we're constantly building an individual solution. We haven't got there yet, and I think we want to move at speed, we have to break that apart. Your model, our compute. Your model, our data. And that model, in that little M model of how to do this acquisition piece, I think is what we haven't gotten to yet. And if we can get to that, or think about deploying this capability like that, the same way that aviation is deployed, we buy the plane, we buy the tire, but we buy the gas separately, and we can buy the gas commoditized, and the aircraft is very specialized. I think we have to start thinking about this analytics solution that AI enables in that same way.
Lindsey, CDAO, you've got a huge remit, you and your team. What's challenging from your perspective right now? Or what's a win, where you had a bottleneck, you had a problem, and you guys overcame it in the last few months?
I mean, I think a big win that, we can all take credit for is that the pace and the acceleration of getting the capability out there and the pace at which the department is advancing, I think is actually quite impressive. Each of our organizations has really kind of been at the center or the forefront of all of those activities. And so there is a demand that is out in the enterprise for modern technologies, whether they're involving AI or whether they're not. DIU and CDAO in particular have been working closely together on how do you use the kind of breadth of acquisition authorities available, either FAR-based and non-FAR-based, to make sure that we're getting a wide range of vendors into the ecosystem. And I think it's really interesting to see how much we are advancing, how the department thinks about acquiring these very software-centric capabilities. So I think from our perspective, it's doing a couple things. It's working very closely to keep our kind of finger on the pulse of the demand of the user. So by embedding with major tier 1 exercises and experimentation efforts, we're able to more closely embed with the users and see what are those pain points they have on a daily basis, what technologies could they need access to, or would they benefit from having access to. So being able to partner with experimentation series like those out at INDOPACOM, or with the Armies for Project Convergence Capstone 5 earlier this year, really allows us to kind of keep the finger on the pulse of the demands from the user base, and then come to the table with the range of authorities that we have to enable access to all of the kind of wonderful third-party vendors and the best of American innovation. So, CDAO has their TradeWinds marketplace where companies can submit videos and become awardable, so that helps us enable access to those vendors for the enterprise. DIU is very pioneering how we do commercial solutions offerings and OTs, so that even though it feels slow relative to where it could be, it is actually much faster. And I think having all of these organizations work closely together as a kind of community of practitioners is really helping advance the state of where we are.
I think also a theme that I've seen here in DC for all of you that are local across, attending a lot of these different events and panels, it really does feel like the wind's at our backs in many ways the last 100 days. And there's this palpable excitement. Yes, we're a little late sometimes to see what's the latest memo from the SecDef's office and how do we interpret this and how does it apply to us. We're not late, sorry, but we're drowning trying to ingest all of that. At the same time, a lot of these perennial challenges that we've talked about, we actually are the triangle's coming together. The triangle of capital, policy, and builders building good tech, that's actually working in many ways. And I would say one of the biggest places we've seen a change is on the policy front. If we think about a lot of the legislation either working through right now or changes, EOs that we've seen in the last 120 days.
Yeah, I think I would. I think one of the biggest ones for us. You mentioned a little bit about our pipelines, right? And how do we quickly get this stuff to the warfighter? Yep. How do we build out our iPhone platform, if you will? I agree with you. I will offer, for a little bit of maybe disagreement, that we have Ubuntu, we have Linux, we have Yum, we have pip, we have Podman, we have Docker. If I ask anybody in the audience today, raise your hand if you build software. If I ask you to build me a Docker container for your software that does not reach out externally, raise your hand if you think you can do that with your software today. Okay, apparently no one builds software. What about Podman? All right, these are all like distros where I can take my software, I can put it, I know how to send it through an accreditation pipeline, I know how to scan it, and I know how to make sure I can deploy it to the edge. We have that, and industry built that for us in the open source community. I will argue what we didn't have until December of 2024 in NDAA 2025, section 1522, is this great line about presumptive reciprocity. This is huge. What we currently have is one authorizing official within their boundary can approve their software, but I have to do it again every single time I want to put it on a different platform, a different system, a different service. So the Navy cannot use something that the Air Force can have. So if I want to do JADC2, well, you're going to have to get 7 different services to agree and 30 different airplane authorizing officials that that Podman container is acceptable. And potentially every single time you update your software, dear God, if there's a CVE, you're screwed, right? Because we're just going to have to accept it. And that's the wrong way to do things. But because of this new policy, we have until 25 June as a department to implement this. We now have presumptive reciprocity. So if any authorizing official, including the authorizing official for ACPOT, says that we can use this, now the rest of the Department of Defense must presume that it is safe unless they articulate in writing why it is not. And that is a huge policy shift that's going to allow us to now have Podman containers, Docker containers across the force and be able to give it to those airmen flying those drones tomorrow.
So I often get asked, like, what are the keys to transition of our prototypes? So I look at it as like the transition trifecta. First one is resourcing, second one's contract vehicle, the third one's ATOs. ATOs are the single largest roadblock to adoption of our capabilities. Hands down, there are times when we'll award a contract and they can't actually implement it in production because they're still waiting on ATOs. That can take up to a year. That's a problem. And it's a problem that is usually due to, just like Salsa was saying, a misunderstanding of what the risk architecture is and how do we address it. Do I really need to go through a full accreditation process every time I update a model? Maybe, maybe not, but probably not. But that's how everything is currently worked through the accreditation process. So that's where there needs to be the most amount of reform. And so the presumptive reciprocity is one piece, and some of the work that's coming out of CIO office right now on attacking the input into EMAS problem is another, but the colloquialism I like to use is, if I still have to climb Mount Everest, it doesn't matter if there's a helicopter at the top to take me to other mountains.
Yep.
I still have to spend a significant amount of blood, sweat, and treasure to get up there.
Yeah. If we could push it down to the first G-series order, right, where we move ATO and risk for software to the same acceptable level of risk I have when I go fly my airplane, right? And I say, for this mission, you are low, medium, or high, and you accept that high means you're probably going to die. Medium, you're going to try and do everything else, but you're going to push it. And low is, please do not get this airplane shot down. We can't afford another one, right? Like, that should be the same thing on software, because we're going to have a breach. In the next 15 years, there's going to be an airplane that crashes, and we're probably going to lose an airman, unfortunately. But that is what we sign up for, and we have to start moving in the fact that we are going to have a breach, we're going to debrief it, we're going to do a safety briefing about it, and we're going to move forward onto the next thing. Otherwise, we're going to be stuck with a Podman container that I can never put on an airman's machine.
So we've spent a lot of time talking about the barriers and the challenges. Before we pivot to AI and operational use and some of the projects that personally excite us kind of across the board, I think it's worth noting that DoD, not just DoD, but our investors, right? Congress as well, they've woken up to the fact, we have all collectively woken up to the fact that it is incredibly hard to sell and scale into this space. And we know where and why it is hard. And we are now putting capital against those problems. So you've heard some of it with ATOs. There's a whole lot more that these organizations that we're all working towards. which I think is a very positive thing. Nobody was talking about that 24 months ago. As somebody who repeatedly was talking about barriers to entry, you have to bring it down. We cannot be triaging each program by program. You need to do it holistically. The DoD's woken up, Congress has woken up. Congress wants to know, what are the top problems? What are you doing to solve them? So that's just goodness across the board. But in the last few minutes that we have, tell me, like I said, key operational use cases that you're proud of, that are making you feel like everything you see as a consumer in America is encouraging, because now you're able to do those things even as a DoD employee.
Yeah, I can speak to a couple of my efforts. So one of my proudest is it's offensive cyber capability. If you think about the planning process for delivering cyber effects against targets, right? In the past, it's extremely manual, right? The process of identifying targets, doing mission analysis, understanding vulnerabilities out there and what would work against which targets, that kind of stuff. Through TACMs, one of my programs as part of Project Constellation, we've been able to build a capability that helps automate cyber weapon target pairing. And now we've used it in operations. If you actually go to NSA.net, you can easily find it and use it. And now we're starting to integrate more advanced agentic AI capabilities into that to even make it an even better capability in terms of planning. On the defensive side, through our Candor program, we've been able to work towards solving the anomaly detection problem, finding anomalous behavior on networks, by moving away from just purely looking at network data and using AI-enriched grace-based data and other types of threat intelligence and things like that, to be able to now sort of find malicious anomalies in networks, and be able to deploy such capabilities, at the edge, in small flyaway kits, to larger garrison or enterprise capabilities. And I guess the last one I'll talk about is our semaphore program, which it's a capability, a suite, if you will, of analytics for detecting multimedia manipulation. Think deepfake, things like that. And so through semaphore, we've had over 25 technology transitions, not just in the United States, across the DoD and IC, but also to Interpol and other international organizations, where we are now able to not only detect deepfakes and other types of manipulation, but also do attribution, which we can scale up and aggregate and correlate to start looking at ways to analyze, campaigns to support, information operation planning. So at least on the cyberspace side, we've been able to make extremely incredible gains through the use of AI and other analytics for those mission spaces.
Within DIU, the one project that, I think we've got 18 in flight with our portfolio right now as it is, plus a few more in curation. But one that its final transition a couple months ago was Project Ammo. And the use case is kind of immaterial, but the big thing is we got 5 different vendors to build a full end-to-end MLOps pipeline for updating models and curation of that. And they're running on DoD networks today at multiple impact levels. That's huge, and that again ties into what we were talking about earlier with lowering that bar. So now I can rapidly deploy models, retrain them, and then most importantly, see how they're operating in it, and if they're being either ineffective or there's a newer model out, roll that new model in so it's complete seamless coverage for the users. And again, that's running today, and the team actually did an incredible job, and they did win AppFit funding for it. And for those that know about AppFit, you'll know that it's incredibly difficult to win that for software. And the fact that we were able to do that is quite impressive and a true testament to the work of the team and the vendors that have implemented it.
That's awesome. I'll talk a little bit about deploying AI models, so for what we're excited about, right? So we'll talk about hybrid compute, we'll talk about getting things out to the airmen, and then we'll talk about how that enables robotics. So hybrid compute, we got our first DGX SuperPod. I have 8 H100s, y'all, at the IL5 level on CUI that are super exciting to play with.
Can I borrow them?
Oh, if you want one, man,
Perfect,
come on, join the team. So it lives up in Rome, New York, in addition to a slew of other on-prem hardware that we can use to fine-tune models, to train models, or to just run in prototype software for SBIR companies, which is outstanding. And we can do that till our heart's content. We can move from there into our other platform that we're helping to pay for within AFWERX and is now transitioning to H&JJ within the Air Force, stitches.mil, where you have, at the CUI level, an IL4 and ITAR approved place to go run Jupyter notebooks that you can pip and yum install with virtual machines at multiple different Linux distributions that you have sudo access to that are connected to the cloud that you can go dev on. Oh my God. All of those words would have been completely foreign 5 years ago, to your point about how quickly we're moving in DoD. All of that is enabling our main mission at AFWERX. These are enabling technologies within Prime to do multi-agent robotics, to get the computer vision pipelines such that some of our cyber companies can spit swap models so that I can change on the fly what I'm looking for from an ISR perspective, or change my mission for half of my fleet without necessarily being in contact with them in a mesh. That's huge. I can now fine-tune what I'm going to be looking for if the enemy decides to paint all their warships pink tomorrow. That's huge. And I can do it in an accredited way, push that through, get it to the edge on the platform, and have a successful mission pushing out, again, to multiple different MAGCOMs. Those are things that just were not possible just 6 to 12 months ago.
I was going to say ammo as well. You stole my thing, because ammo on the Navy side, the undersea, the ability to push those models out, right? Identify a use case. I don't have a model for it. Get the data, train it up, push it back out. Also run multiple models in parallel to be able to test that out. I think that was a success. And I also see kind of the development of some of those tools, distributing that innovation across the fleet. If you actually trace back all of our major AI programs, whether it's Maven, Raven Sentry, a few other things, they all came from the bottom up. They were all an individual out there who understood, hey, I've got a problem and I can solve it with data and AI. None of it came from the bottom or from the top down. So the ability to start to enable that, and we're seeing that with some tools being built out of various locations. For example, an infantry officer out of MPS built a little planning tool to solve their problem, his problem as an infantry officer for planning, and be able to get that through. NPS hopefully about to put in 72 GB200s for on-prem compute to be able to continue to do that thing. All right, how do we start working with language action models, and be able to start getting that physical agentic AI out there, those physical systems to train on the robotics piece, to go out and experiment and play with it, and be able to, once we identify a potential use case, test, deploy, and use quickly through those accredited pipelines.
Yeah, I guess to bring it home, I have the benefit of being at the end of the receiving line here. I think one of the themes that I hear really clearly is that each of us are using our positions, our organizations, the taxpayer dollars we have stewardship over, to have an outsized impact from where we sit on the entire enterprise. And so I hear themes of enabling access, whether it's access to technology, access to contracts, access to users, access to data, to really enable those out in the enterprise who are ultimately going to be the end users of the technology to either do their own development, to do their own work, to configure their own workflows, or help them get access to the right things that can help them do that. So I think of kind of two examples from the CDAO perspective that really bring that one home for me is, one, we can provide access to the capability and the technology. So one of the things that we're able to do is accelerate the access to mission command applications and a really robust and powerful data integration platform. So that in and of itself is powerful, it is impactful, but the real magic is when you see the men and women who are sitting either out at a combatant command headquarters or out in the AOR, open that platform up, do their own development, configure their own workflow, and we're able to do that from the headquarters by providing access to the contract, to the license, to the compute, and enable them to really do for themselves. We can also think about how we do this in how we procure and develop our own technologies. So one thing CDAO was able to do last November, December, when we awarded a production OT for an edge data mesh capability, was to secure government purpose rights for the software development kit. that means that I can put that software development kit in the hands of a government user, and they can go off, if they can't do their own data integrations, onboard their own sensors, and now I've got kind of an outsized impact for the capability that we've procured. And I really think that kind of theme of all of us working together and making sure that we're making the best advantage of kind of our own positions is really rewarding.
Great point. And you stitched it all together. Thank you. All right, to close, we're going to do a rapid fire. So I've got 2 questions for each of you. Thing 1, what would you change, wearing your DoD hats, what is the one thing you would change so that you can move faster with scaling AI across the department? Second topic to hit is in your personal life. What is the top thing you're using AI for? Or what excites you the most, even if you're not using it the most? Start at the end.
Okay. I'm going to answer the first question. We need an AI range, the DoD. Testing, doing operational test and evaluation, even developmental T&E of AI systems is a hard thing, and it needs unique cyber-physical digital range capabilities to include embodied intelligence like robotics, to enterprise platforms. Currently, the DoD does not have that, and so I strongly recommend making investments in terms of building an AI range, no different than a cyber range or other types of national capabilities we have. In terms of for fun, I'm an AI researcher, so most of my fun stuff is doing AI research. And so I am, a lot of my work is focused on the area of metacognitive AI. So getting away from just robustness and resiliency and moving towards like anti-fragility. So just like how the body, like our musculoskeletal system or economic systems, things like that, we actually get better by failure. We get better by breaking and pain and things like that. What's that equivalent for AI, right? So rather than just like failing when we get used in the real world or staying resilient to bounce back, what if like through shock and failure and pain, our systems can get better? So particularly for, systems working in DDoS environments, where they're out and they just need to come up, learn on their own and make adaptations. So a lot of my research is focused on sort of novel ways to do that.
So I don't think I can stress any more about how ATOs are a roadblock, and we have to fix the accreditation process. Hands down. So the other area in my personal life that I'm working on is primarily on area of edge compute, and how do we actually deploy models where I need them the most, looking away from data center-based compute and move them towards the edge. There's a lot of operational tie-ins with that too. There's also a couple others we're talking about, but that's where I care the most about.
Yeah, for sure. I think hit on ATOs again. We need to move that accreditation and that risk down to the first military commander. They have the mission risk. They need to be accepting the cyber risk within that chain of command. Outside of that is improper, in my opinion. And I think that in my personal life, I am vibe coding and trying to figure out how, same thing, what is the smallest model that I can get on the tiniest Raspberry Pi? And what can I do with that whenever I take it with me and I'm disconnected from wherever I am. So that's super fun.
I think across the department, our senior leadership is broadly ignorant of AI, what it can do, what it is, how it works. So we have a lack of demand signal from the top to really say, I want more of this. And that lack of demand signal is why we don't move as fast as we could, right? There's a number of people that get it. There's a number of people that still think it's bupkis. There's a number of people that are scared of it. I wish our senior leadership understood it better, and I've seen those that learn that all of a sudden start asking for it more. And in my personal life, something to, as I see these agentic systems, agentic agents start to come on, to just sort of minimize some of that background drudgery. If we all have our own personal executive assistant, they can handle a lot of those minor little tasks, just help us out with basic stuff and sort of like smooth our lives over a little bit more. Very excited about that.
Yeah, so I would say just accelerating and expanding the breadth of knowledge on how we manage, procure, deploy, and sustain commercial software products and software-centric products and data-centric products. And I think that is one of the biggest barriers that we're having to overcome, is that it looks different and it feels different from traditional procurement and systems. And ultimately, we have to walk and chew gum at the same time. We have to do the things that we're used to doing, but we also have to be able to bring in this kind of entire new sector of innovation. And so the more folks we have who are experienced at procuring and managing and sustaining commercial software, I think the better for us. I think, again, all of our organizations are kind of leading the charge on being the kind of nucleus of knowledge as that expands out. And then how I use AI, I would say kind of to that is getting my feet wet and better understanding how to use it for kind of that executive assistant type function. How do you get better prompting, use it to take first cuts at drafting things, and just kind of getting it to be more of like second nature to use it every day.
Perfect. All right, well, please join me in thanking all of our panelists. And thank you all for the participation and sticking with us through the end. Hope you're walking away with at least a new nugget. Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our programming for the Exchange. On behalf of the Special Competitive Studies Project, thank you for joining us for 3 days of insights on military innovation. To our speakers, guests, and collaborators, thank you for sharing your time and reflections. We wish you safe travels, and we look forward to seeing you at the next year's Exchange. Until then, let's continue advancing the legacy of innovation and national security together. Have a great afternoon.